Roku was the Fire Nation-born Avatar, immediately succeeding Avatar Kyoshi and preceding Avatar Aang. Roku's memory served as a guiding force for Aang throughout his quest to end the Hundred-Year War. You're watching Avatar discussions, and today we're running down Roku, where he comes from, and how he lived his Avatar life. Roku was born to a noble family from the Fire Nation. Roku never much wanted for anything in life, and was a kind, determined, and friendly child. During his childhood, the world had enjoyed an unprecedentedly long time of peace due to the long life of the previous avatar, Kyoshi, and was on the brink of an industrial revolution due to the unprecedented collaboration fostered by business and academia to solve the world's most pressing issues, and scholars, educators, and innovators directly forged connections with one another in the name of progress. He spent much of his childhood visiting the palace, and Roku and Prince Sozin were best friends. They spent a lot of time together and practiced their firebending. They were so close that Sozin was able to immediately recognize Roku's crush on Tamin, encouraging him to speak with her. They also shared the same birthday, which they celebrated together. During a party celebrating his and Sozin's 16th birthday, Roku was informed by the Fire Sages that he was the Avatar. Before Roku left the Fire Nation to master the other three elements, Sozin came by to talk to him and was informed by Roku that the sages had told him not to bring anything with him on his travels, as the Avatar required no worldly possessions on his journey. After learning this, Sozin gave him the headpiece worn by the Crown Prince of the Fire Nation, hoping that he was at least allowed to have that. Roku took the headpiece gratefully and wore it for the rest of his life. After learning of his identity as the Avatar, Roku began his journey to train under masters of the other three bending arts. Following the cycle, he needed to learn airbending first, so he traveled to the Southern Air Temple to learn from Monk Zay. While there, Roku became good friends with his flying partner, a young air nomad named Gyatso, who would, in his elder years, become the guardian, mentor, and friend to Avatar Aang. During one of the airbending lessons, which involved the students taking off with their gliders, Roku showed off by performing a loop. When Gyatso tried to upstage him by air surfing but fell, Roku came to the aid of his friend, though their combined weight proved too much for Roku to control, and they crashed into the other students standing safely on the ground. After training for several years, Roku mastered the art of airbending and traveled to the Northern Water Tribe to learn waterbending from Takukak. At first, Takukak refused to train the Avatar, believing that any Fire Nation subject would hold a higher loyalty to the Fire Lord than the people of the Four Nations, as he had been betrayed by his best friend spying for the Fire Nation as a young man. However, Roku refused to seek another instructor, and eventually convinced Takukak of his devotion by living in the north for several years. When he started to train to learn waterbending in earnest, the task was particularly difficult for Roku, as water is the natural opposite of fire. However, years of training enabled him to duel his master and stand his ground. During one of these confrontations, Roku took the brunt of a water blow and ended up in the ocean, but popped back up to stand on an ice platform and swept Takukake away with a tall wave of water, crashing into the pinnacle of the chief's palace, a good distance away. After Roku mastered waterbending, he often worked together with Takukak in private, but they maintained their distance in public to ensure that the waterbending master was not accused of being the Avatar's puppet during his diplomatic missions. Moving on, Roku traveled to the Earth Kingdom to learn earthbending from a master named Sud, with whom he developed a great friendship. During one of their training sessions, they raced each other atop slabs of earth to the top of a hill. Although Sud was in the lead most of the time, Roku managed to best him to the top with time to spare to prepare tea for both of them, much to Sud's surprise. Through his travels, Roku saw how unique each nation was, and how their peace was held together by fragile threads. He learned what it was like for people living in poverty, and realized what his privilege afforded him in his youth. For Roku, traveling the nations had not just been about learning the elements, but also about understanding the world and his duties as the Avatar. Soon after Roku set out on his journey, the world began to change, with events such as Earth King Jalun's purge of the sages taking place, and the Earth Kingdom government began to grow greedy and corrupt. Changes at the hands of ambitious world leaders when Roku was still young meant that the world was a much more complicated place by the time he had mastered the four elements than it had been after Kyoshi's death. Between 58 to 54 BG, the Four Nations Summit and Technological Symposium took place in Hari Bulkan, and Avatar Roku sent his waterbending master, Taku Kak, to ensure everything went smoothly. Both the Avatar and the waterbender foresaw a possible political incident occurring at the summit, and it was important that the delegates kept the peace with one another, so the summit did not turn into an international incident. Takukak did not want to out himself as Roku's spy, so he tasked a group of heroes to help him during the event. During 55 BG, after mastering earthbending, Roku spent 5 months in retreat at the Crescent Island Fire Temple, one of the Avatar temples, attempting to master the Avatar state under the guidance of Fire Sage Kaja. Growing impatient after failing to master it with meditation, he tried using the winter solstice sun to force himself into the Avatar state. Despite his success, he became trapped under its influence and was unable to control his powers, resulting in the destruction of the upper half of the fire temple and the eruption of the nearby volcano. Kaja eventually managed to free Roku from the state by aligning the Avatar's eyes with the winter solstice sun once more, halting the destruction of the temple. In payment for his near destruction of the Fire Sage's temple, Roku rebuilt parts of the temple and carved new underground passages out of the island's magma. He also personally provided aid to people living on the neighboring islands, as the region was suffering from seismic instability as a consequence, with earthquakes damaging many homes across the eastern Fire Islands. Following the incident, Roku became more patient with his training and completely mastered the Avatar state afterward. War threatened to break out between the Northern Water Tribe and Earth Kingdom after a tsunami hit the northern coast of the Earth Kingdom state of Chenbao. The Earth Kingdom blamed waterbenders for sending the tsunami, while the Northern Water Tribe blamed earthbenders for creating an underwater earthquake. But the truth was that it was simply a horrible natural disaster. Supported by the air nomads of the Northern Air Temple, Roku intervened before the conflict could escalate, and both sides backed down, though their navies remained in the contested waters. Roku requested air nomad elders to form a covert group of airbenders, whose job centered around quickly and quietly dealing with issues for the Avatar without question. This delegation was led by Sharab, who took his role very seriously. In the following years, Roku faced rising worldwide tensions due to cultural changes and the growing influence of nationalist expansionist ideas. As the world continued to develop new technologies, nations began to compete with each other over raw materials and other resources which were needed for such innovations, leading to numerous small-scale conflicts and diplomatic incidents. Dark spirits also began to stir in the polar regions, which spiritually inclined tribespeople believed was the result of nations abusing natural resources and laying claim to sacred land, and the Fire Nation beginning to hunt dragons. Meanwhile, the world was affected by disasters such as floods in the southern Earth Kingdom. Roku worked hard to maintain the balance between the nations and did all that he could to negotiate the potentially volatile situations of his day. With most of the nations becoming increasingly selfish and aggressive, the air nomads were Roku's main allies, and the temples gladly came to Roku's aid when he called upon them, despite the protests of the breakaway sect known as the Guiding Wind, who claimed that Roku was overstepping as Avatar by asking the air nomads to be involved in worldly politics. After his mastery of the Avatar state, Roku returned to the Fire Nation capital, having become a fully realized Avatar. He reunited with Sozin, who had since been crowned as Fire Lord, greeting each other with a hug. A few months later, Roku married his childhood sweetheart Ta Min and had Sozin take the position of his best man during the ceremony. At the wedding, Sozin asked to speak with Roku in private and informed his close friend that he had thought hard about the state of the world. He told Roku that he firmly believed the Fire Nation had entered a period of great prosperity and proposed to Roku that together the pair could spread this wealth to the world by expanding the empire. Roku was horrified by this proposition, telling Sozin that the four nations were to be kept separate and advised the Fire Lord to never bring the subject forth in future conversations. At some point in his life, Roku found a dragon, Fang, when he was a baby, not yet hatched from his egg, and adopted him as his animal guide and constant companion during his life as the Avatar. He eventually settled down and began living out his life with Ta Min, with whom he later had a daughter, Rena. 17 years after Roku's wedding, He discovered that Sozin had proceeded with his plans and set up colonies within the Earth Kingdom. Infuriated at this act of war, Roku confronted Sozin. Blasting open the doors to the throne room inside the Fire Nation royal palace, he lambasted his old friend and ordered him to cease his aggressive expansion. When Sozin retorted that Roku's loyalty lay with the Fire Lord and the nation's progress, deeming him a traitor if he did so otherwise, Roku warned the Fire Lord not to challenge him. As he turned to leave, Sozin attacked him from behind, but Roku easily dodged the attack and used his earthbending to reappear behind Sozin, giving him the opportunity to strike him with an air blast. Suspending Sozin in the air with an earth pillar by the collar of his robes, Roku entered the Avatar state and destroyed the throne room and part of the palace with a massive gust of air. He spared Sozin's life for the sake of their past friendship and left him still hanging above the ground, though not before warning him never to move forward with his plans again, as it would otherwise result in his permanent end. However, the Avatar allowed the first Fire Nation colonists to remain at their new homes in the Earth Kingdom. 25 years later, Roku's home island was consumed in a violent volcanic eruption, so massive that even Fire Lord Sozin could see and feel it from his palace 100 miles away. Initially, he managed to give time for the other inhabitants, including his wife, to escape the island by forming an air sphere around him. Through the use of his bending abilities, Roku attempted to contain the volcanic destruction, although it was delayed by continuous spitting of lava from the volcano's mouth, using earthbending to create trenches to divert the lava safely to the sea, and using airbending to solidify the lava and blow away the poisonous gases from the geysers formed underneath, until he used the Avatar state to bend lava to the other side. He eventually lost hope, though, when the secondary volcano close by also erupted. At that moment, however, Sozin arrived on his dragon and offered his assistance to the Avatar. The two used their bending to try to contain the lava flow, with Roku saving Sozin from a nasty fall using earthbending, but the poisonous gases eventually forced them to flee the mountainside. On their way down, Roku warned Sozin to not breathe the gas and used his airbending to protect them, before succumbing to a gas geyser himself. His vision blurring, Roku pleaded for help. Instead, Sozin realized that without Roku in his way, his plans of conquest would come into fruition, therefore leaving on his dragon and a shocked Roku to die. Aghast by his former friend's decision and reason to leave him for dead, Roku ultimately realized that his death was inevitable. Right before the pyroclastic flow engulfed him, Fang curled up with his master and the two died together. What a sad fate abandoned by your lifelong friend. At least he laughed again with Gyatso in his next life. Did we miss anything, or is there another Avatar history video you'd like? Let us know. Stay flamin'.